Hi everyone, this is Kyle. And again, like Nate said, I'm going to be going over the Revit 2016 R2 new features that just came out this past month. They introduced this for subscription clients only. So if you're on subscription, you can get this R2 to download and install on your Revit platform, and you will have the features here. Now, just to give you some pre-background on this one, Autodesk did do the same thing in 2015, where you had 2015 R2. Now, currently, last year it was update release 4, and then there was update release 4 R2. Autodesk kind of split the updates into two different directions. This year, it seems like they are going to keep doing this, the service packs. They have Service Pack 1 and Service Pack 2. It is not to be confused with R2. R2 is not a service pack. It is basically an addition. You do not have to uninstall Revit and then install R2. You simply install 2016 and then you can install R2 over top of it. So again, you do not have to uninstall. It is just an addition. Hopefully in the future we'll see what Autodesk does with the updates afterward. If they release a Service Pack 3, or if they release a Service Pack 3 and then a Service Pack 3 for R2. That's yet to be determined, but we will keep an eye on that to see if Autodesk does that or not. So to start off with some of the new features, we have multidiscipline features, some architecture features, and then some MEP features. There are no structural only features in R2, just simply a multidiscipline architecture and some MEP. So one of the first major things in the release for multidiscipline is global parameters. And global parameters are simply parameters that you can enter into a project that can globally change things in the project. For example, you can link dimensions to parameters to control them. Just like you can in the family environment, when you're editing a family, you can draw a dimension, and then you can take that dimension and link it to a parameter to control it once you're in a project. Well, now you have that flexibility inside a project to link a dimension to a parameter and control it. You can also take family instant parameters and link them to a parameter inside the project as well to globally change it there. So here I'm going to jump to Revit to show you this feature. I already built one up here, but I'm going to show you what I did. I took dimensions here and I put a dimension between each grid, and then I also took a dimension and put it overall between the grid. So here if I select this dimension, I can take that dimension, and up here on the ribbon there is label. Just like in the family environment, I can drop this down and I'll see a list of parameters I've already associated, or I can click add parameter. Then I get this global parameter properties where I can enter the name of the parameter, the discipline, the type of parameter, the tooltip, and I can also make it reporting. So here I'm going to go ahead and cancel out here because I want to show you what you can also do. If I go to the Manage tab, there's global parameters. And here I can see a list of all the parameters I've added to the project, and I have some control parameters here and a value, and then I have a formula. So here, just like in the family environment, you have formulas that you can control this with. So for example of what I did here, just as just to play around with this new feature here, I took all these dimensions that are going between the grids, and I selected them all and I added them to a control east-west grid spacing parameter. Then I took the overall and I linked it to an overall parameter. Then I came into global parameters and I added two additional parameters called grid centered and grid spacing. The grid centered here, up in the formula area for this, I put in a formula that says if grids west, grid centered, then it will be the grid west overall, divided by 10. So I have 10 grids placed in here, so divided it by 10. If this is unchecked, I want it to simply equal east-west grid spacing, which is this parameter right here. So here, if I take this, right now they're all at 25 because my overall is 250. But then if I come over here and I simply uncheck this, and I'm going to put this at 15 feet, I'm going to hit OK, and all my grids move to 15 feet apart. But what I also did to make this a little bit better as well is I also had a grid north or east-west grid building overall, and I just simply made it a reporting parameter that if I came in here, picked on this, and then I find that dimension and I change its value, I'm going to say it's now 200, hit enter, and it's going to change the overall grid. I have a couple constraints I need to change, but it will change the dimension of it, so now that my grid spacing is a little bit differently. Then again, I can come back up here and say grid centered, and now they're centered again. So here I just did a couple of different things with being able to do it also for the north-south. So same thing here, I can check this, and my grids over here are now centered. Or I can come back in here and check this again, hit OK, and they're back to a set value. What's also unique about this is the ability to do other potential things, such as mechanically. One use for this one that I found was pretty handy was there's always the issue of determining the height of a diffuser or a lighting fixture. We don't really have a simple way to determine the elevation from the floor. So I do have it in my project here. I did place some diffusers, and there's a parameter inside them for elevation, but I can't schedule that. But I did create a parameter inside this called air terminal elevation. What I did with this is this instant parameter, I can link it to a parameter inside my project. So I took a bunch of these diffusers here, and I simply linked them all to the same parameter. But I also did another version where it's at a different ceiling height. So I took these versions and I link it to a different ceiling height. So I have an entry ceiling and an office ceiling. So they're different elevations. Then I came in and I drew reference planes of where I hosted them, drew a dimension between the level and that reference, took these dimensions and linked them to a parameter. So now I'm going to go to my schedule here for my air terminals, and you will see that they say 12 feet, 8 feet, 12 feet here. So I'm going to go back to my project, and I'm going to window tile this so that you get to see this happen automatically. So here in my schedule I see 12, 8. I'm going to go into global parameters, and I'm going to change this to 10 feet. Hit OK. Changed it here, changed it here. So now it's reading all the same parameter at the same time. So it's a pretty nice ability to be able to globally change something in the project and have them update at the same time. And a couple of questions that I'm seeing come through here. Can you use global parameters on dimension strings? I'm going to go back to my project here and I can test this here. So I'm going to grab a dimension and I'm going to place a dimension across multiple, and then I'm going to come in here and select this, and I cannot link this to a dimension. So no, strings cannot be linked to a value. It has to be an individual dimension. Also, another question was, does this allow link of text notes? Currently, right now, this is the global parameters are not available for everything. For example, here if I select text, I don't have a parameter to link it to. Some system families such as rooms, I don't have any parameters that I can link. It seems to be mainly regular families. So here if I select this door here and go up in the properties, there are a few such as the swing angle that have the little radio box here that I can associate that with a parameter. So that was the first new feature about global parameters. You can again globally change something in the project and have it update multiple places within the project. The next feature, it's a small feature, but it's also a pretty big feature at the same time, is the print export. You can now actually cancel when you print or export multiple views and sheets to multiple files. So for example, if you hit print and you had a PDF and you have 50 sheets selected and you were printing, each sheet was its own PDF. Before in the past with 16 without R2 and under, when you hit print, you would have to cancel each window that popped up. So you would be spinning there 50 times. You'd have to hit cancel. Now with the R2, you can actually cancel all of them at the same time. So instead of having to do each of them individually, you can now cancel them manually or cancel them automatically all at the same time instead of having to wait. Some performance enhancements that they've also made to Revit with the R2 is the occasional cooling of what they did with this one is the improved performance of the draw visible elements only. This improves the performance by reducing the amount of time it takes to open a view. So when you're spending time opening and closing views, what Revit's doing now is inside the options, there is now a new setting here under graphics, draw visible elements only. This is checked by default install, so it will simply automatically be there. But what this is going to help for is when you open a view, such as a 3D view, right away Revit is starting to redraw all this stuff, even if you can't see it. So here, for example, I have walls all underneath. Revit can't see those walls. So here when I move around, it's not going to draw those walls, so I can actually move faster. So some of the bigger projects, this is a small project, but bigger projects would take time to orbit the model, so it would take a while to regen that model. Whereas in now, Revit's only going to draw the things that are visible. So when you move around and then you let go, Revit will reanalyze it and kind of draw those things. But then again, if you start to turn off things or delete things, Revit then is going to start thinking about those other elements because they are seen. So again, this is just increasing the performance by only showing you what is there and that's visible instead of drawing things that are hidden. The export to DWF and DWF-X, they significantly reduce the processing time it takes to export views and sheets to multiple DWFs and DWF-X files. It makes it a little bit easier to export all of them when there's, again, multiple files, not just a single file that contains all of them, but multiple files. Before in the past, it would take a little bit of time to export those. That time has been reduced. Also, the new feature is with performance are color fills and background processing. These are kind of both in the same term here. I separate them here and Autodesk separates them. Color fill plans, when you're updating the color plans, sometimes it takes time to process those color plans, so whenever you change something, it takes a little bit to update those in the background. So when you change a color, you might have to wait a little bit because Revit's thinking about all those other views. So it's taking time. Well, now they've introduced this background processes that when you make a change, it will actually start to process in the background instead of it doing it right away and you have to wait until it finishes. You can actually continue working. Now, I don't have a true example of this. I've done some testing, and on larger models, I will see this a lot more. But on this simple model, I didn't really see it. But there is a new button over here in the lower right-hand corner of AutoCAD or Revit here of background processes. If you click on this, you will see background calculations in progress. So whenever you update a color plan, you might see this pop up down here. And then when you click on it, you'll see that process going on. So there are a few things that go in the background, but this is one of them is the color plans, and a few other things will pop up down here now when it's doing something in the background. One of the next performance things, this is a performance thing, but it's also just a kind of a performance in the regard of speeding up time to make a change to the object styles. With the object styles now, you can actually now select multiple object styles and get rid of them at the same time. So if I came in here and I had a ton of objects or multi styles in here that I could delete. I can actually now select multiple in here and delete them all at the same time. Now, these are right here, so I can select control here, and I can select multiple of them and hit delete, and I will delete those as the same time instead of having to select one at a time and delete. Currently, this is only available for object styles. So again, all the tabs in the object styles you can do this on. It is currently not available for other things such as line styles and line weights. I came in here into this one, and if I select one of these, let me go ahead and create a few in here real quick just to show this. I think this one, already in use. So here, if I select multiple of them here, I can delete that. But it's the line patterns. This is the one that is still not available to select multiple elements, not line styles. Line styles is still object styles related. So that one you can select multiple and delete, just not line patterns. And also fill patterns, I can't select multiple in here yet and delete them. So again, it just speeds up the option to be able to select multiple object styles, line styles, and delete them without having to select one by one by one. The family editor dialog, the family editor has been changed. There are now a couple of different changes here. The first one is the family visibility preview and also filter voids and solids. So to show this one here, I'm going to go into a family. And what the difference is here, when you select an element, you go into the visibility settings, you have options here to be able to turn it off and plan front, back, left, right, and coarse, medium, and fine. You also have the ability to link it to a parameter for the visibility. So I'm going to go ahead and link this to a parameter and has handle. So when you're inside the family and you want to go to make a change in here, I come in up there and I turn off the has handle. If I uncheck that, inside the family I don't see any change happen. With the 2016 R2 feature, there is a new button inside the family for preview visibility. I can come in here and say turn it on. Now I can switch the detail level, coarse, medium, and fine, and I see the results. Then I can also go into family types and uncheck that has handle, and it turns off. So this makes it easier to preview your families with changes in the family without having to load it into a project and make the change there. So again, it makes it very easy to modify a family. And again, if there was any voids in here, if I do a Windows select and there was voids, I would be able to filter those out. So I'm going to quickly come in here and I'll create a void. I didn't see any voids listed, so I'm just going to create one real quick. So now if I select a bunch of things and filter, now there are differences of void and doors, so there's a difference between them instead of solids and voids. Also, the family types dialog box has changed. If I go into family types, there's a new look to the interface here. This is all the same, but over here on the right hand side, it used to be where you had family types, add parameters, modify, and so on. Those have been moved. So up here we now have the new type, rename, delete, and then down here you have the modify, add, remove, move parameters up and down, and the manage lookup tables. For someone that's doing content, this is now making it a little bit more consistent with the rest of the dialog boxes inside Revit. They have the same lookup here and the same parameters down here to make new ones and so on. So they're just making it a little bit more consistent with other dialog boxes. So then another thing is the revisions. They have changed the revisions in the past with being able to change the numbering sequences of the revisions. So you can, instead of saying start off with 1, you can start off with any number you want. But now in the R2, the 2016 R2, you now actually get a preview of what you're changing inside the revision dialog box. And also another one is, I'll show these, is the revision on sheet dialog box has been changed as well. So here if I go to the revisions dialog box, you have the revisions and you get to see the revision number here. But if I come down into the numbering options and I say start off with 101 and hit OK, I'm going to get a preview here of what that number is going to be, 101, 2, 3, and 4. Before in the past, if you changed the numbering sequence, if you just simply said 10 and you hit OK, this would still say 1, 2, 3, 4. Then when you placed it, this would say 10, 11, 12, 13 when you placed it, but it would not update here. So now you're going to get a preview of what you're going to see once you place it on a sheet. So a little bit, it makes it so much handier to know that right away what's going to happen. And also the revision on sheets dialog box has been changed just slightly. If I come into a sheet, go to sheet revisions, in here you now have multiple things. Instead of simply just the revision itself, you now have the date and you have a little bit of the description. Instead of simply just revision 1, 2, 3 or sequence 1, you now get a lot more detail of what it is. So you get the description here as well. So it makes it easier to make sure you're clicking the correct revision that you want to show on your sheet. Revit links have new options available for them when you're loading them in and repositioning them. And also there's a new unload feature. To show this here, I'm going to go into my link Revit. Oh, I have to go to a floor plan first. I'm going to go link Revit. I'm going to select a model. Down here for positioning, if I drop it down, there's a new option called Auto Base Point to Base Point. This is going to take the base point of your project and it's going to line it up. It's going to take the base point of the other project and line it up to the base point of your project, and vice versa, so that you can make sure the base points are lined up. This is handy in a few regards. Origin to origin is still the preferred method of linking across the disciplines, but other types of things I've used this for would be if you have buildings on the same site or new additions, you can take the base point of an existing building and move it to a certain corner, and then in the new part you can link it to, or move the base point to a different position. And so when you line them up, it'll be base point to base point, and they will come in that regard, base point to base point. And also after bringing it in, there's a reposition option that you can reposition it to base point, or you can reposition it to origin. So again, just a new positioning option. And then the unload feature, when you go into the Manage Links dialog, let me quickly load in a model. When you go into the Manage Links and I select this, there is now two options, unload or unload for me. So when you're in a work sharing environment, if you click unload, this is going to unload it for everyone. If you click unload for me, it will unload it just for your local model and not affect anyone else. So very handy to make sure you just keep those links that you don't want to see, unload them for you, but not for everyone else. The next thing here is the work sharing environment. If you were to now select detach from central, the default now will be the same project name, but it will have underscore detach in the name. So this will automatically already let you know what project you're in. In the past, it would simply say untitled, and you may forget what project you're in. Well, now it defaults the same name, just underscore detached. The view range dialog box has changed. It gives you now a preview option. So here, if I'm going to go into I'm going to go into a view range. There is now a preview option that lets you know what you're changing. 1, 2, and 3, and then it gives you the description over here: primary cut range, view depth, and so on. The view filter dialog box has also been changed. the rule-based and selection-based. If I go to View, Filters, there's just now two settings over here that let you distinguish one from the other so that you know if it's a rule-based or if it's a selection-based filter. The underlay has also been changed. There are a couple settings here for range base level. I can drop that down and pick a level, and then I could tell it to look up or look down. So I could actually now, while in a floor plan, I can quickly, easily see a ceiling plan of that same level if I underlay level 1 and look up. So now even in mechanical, or if I want to see the lighting while in a floor plan, I can now see that lighting. It does halftone it because of settings, but it's now you have that option. And reference planes simply have an option at the end of them that you can click to rename. So in my elevation here, I can have a couple reference planes. If I click it, I can now actually right here click inside there and give it a name. Whereas in the past, you just have to simply come over here into name. Now I just have another option to quickly rename it. Perspective views now have more options for modify them. You now have the modify copy feature. So on the modify tab, modify panel, you have the copy, and you can copy an element while in perspective. You also have access to the clipboard feature that you can now paste and use any of those options of a paste align to current view or select it or current place. You have those options now to use. Spot slope, link slope here. You can now actually, in a linked model, if you link in a model and you need to place a spot slope on that link, you can now do it while in your model. You could place a spot slope and it will detect that link and it will give you the slope of that link. Wall joins have been changed that now right before you draw a wall, you can determine if the wall is going to be joined or not. So if I go into a wall command, I have a feature here of join status, allow or disallow. And if I say allowed, just like it normally would, it would come in and it would automatically join into another wall. I picked the wrong wall here. I had it go up higher. So let me pick a different wall here. And I'm going to draw it, and it's going to automatically connect to this wall. But now I can also change the option and say disallow, come in here and pick it in there, and it will not join. So it defaults both sides to not be allowed joining. Also, when you're using the wall join command, you can now select multiple joins and tell it to allow join, and then you also have the flexibility of telling it, come on, there we go. Select that join, and I have the ability to choose the previews of these. Let me turn off my underlay here. I'm having the issue of picking other things. So I'm going to say wall join. I'm going to pick this join. Oops. Wall join. Pick this one. I'm having an issue here. There we go. Pick that one, and then I have an option of choosing the settings. Railings, there is now a preview image available in your railings properties, type properties. So when I go into the railing command and I go into edit type, when I'm coming in here and making changes, I can hit preview and I get a preview of what's going to happen to the rail. So as I'm making changes in here, I can already see what's going to happen over here without having hit apply and move this dialog box around. So it makes it easier to adjust your railings to make sure it's going to be what you want. Ray Tracer has now been enhanced. This was a new feature that they added Ray Tracer into 16, but now with R2 you can now define custom render quality by level, by let's see what, trying to remember what they were real quick. If I go to my 3D view, there's just a few different settings for the custom. If I come up here and say Ray Tracer, I'm going to pick custom and then edit. And then I have options of materials and advanced. Do I want to render by level? Shorter is quick render. Longer is as more detailed render, so it's not by level of, level in your project, but more level of detail. Then render time, how long do I want to go? Do I want to go a minute or 2 minutes, or until satisfied? So it'll just keep rendering until it's done, until you're satisfied with it. Energy analysis has been updated. There's now a thermal zoning. The command on the ribbon has been renamed to be create energy analysis instead of energy analysis. It's also now more accurate, and the appearance has been improved greatly. Now the MEP enhancements here. Fabrication, you can now insert parts better. You can connect as a tap. Rotation tools are available. Instead of using the Revit rotate, you now have some options. When you place the elbow, you can rotate that elbow and you can pick what angle you want to go to. And then also show service, that it will show service and only show you parts to that. Electrical settings, you now have an option to be able to set a default rating for it. So if I go to the Manage tab, MEP settings, electrical settings, general, there's now a circuit rating. You can now default this to whatever you want, 40, 30, whatever you need to. The default in the past was always 20, and then you had to change it, but now you could set that rating ahead of time. And then the last feature of the MEP is distribution. What this one is here is the ability that if you have a single distribution system in your model and you place a panel, it will default to that single distribution system automatically. This makes it easier when you're placing those electrical panels, that it will default to that distribution system automatically for you without having to drop it down and pick it. This makes it easier especially when you placed it and then you try to connect something to it and it says it doesn't have a distribution system. Now it just does it for you.